Hi, so this is the last section of our video series. This will be on how to automate our deployment and how to test and scale the application. The first video in the series will be on how to use a Azure Resource Manager model and templates in the provisioning process. Our goal will be to understand the IRM model, first of all, in Azure. Then we'll use this template for provisioning the Azure resources of our application. What is Azure Resource Manager first? IRM is a consistent management layer, provision resources in Azure, and perform different tasks. Essentially, we need to provision and deploy resources in Azure. We deploy them as a group, actually at the resource group level. This is very specific to IRM. It is based on definitions, which are the templates. They are written in JSON format. It's a declarative format, in opposite to usual scripts in PowerShell, for example. This is a declarative format. It's idempotent. That means you can execute consecutively the same template on the same target, and it will increment the deployments. It will add new resources if needed. And each time the result will be exactly the same, no matter how many times we execute this template. It allows applying the airbag model. That means you apply access control to our resources, in particular at the resource group level, and can be executed in different ways. The starting point is the API, but we can have also the Azure portal, SDK, command lines, Visual Studio, many things. Let's have several concepts and define the terminology we use in IRM. The base of the IRM model is the resource group. All our deployments will be made at the resource group level, and we'll deploy Azure resources. In order to deploy Azure resources, there are teams that develop this implementation of ARM, and these teams will rely on what we call resource providers. They provide the resources definitions in ARM, and they are in the global model, in the global contract of how ARM is implemented. The ARM template is the JSON definition in which we define our resources that we need to deploy. The template file has a corresponding template parameters file, and this way we separate the parameters from the definition itself. The template has a well-structured format, and this is the template schema. It is defined by the resource provider. And a bit more advanced concept is the linking template. It allows to reference templates within templates, and this way we can structure our definitions, especially in larger deployments. If we look at the Azure Resource Manager model architecture, we see that all relies on resource provider contract. This allows for practically anyone to define resources within ARM. This way we can add new resources coming as definitions. And the resource provider defines and deploys REST endpoints on which the resource manager engine will push the deployment specific to these resources. At the center, we have the resource manager engine, which will actually decompose all this template and target the resource providers in order to deploy each resource. We see that this resource manager model is applicable in the cloud and also on premises. By this, we mean that it is applicable to Azure Stack, which is the private cloud equivalent of Azure Public Cloud. The resource manager model, as I said before, let us apply the RBAC model, and this is defined in Azure Active Directory, Azure AD. On top of the resource manager engine, we have the ARM API, which is exposed. And this ARM API is attacked by different tools, like the Azure portal, or command lines. We can have either PowerShell or CLI command line. And we can also develop and deploy IRM templates from Visual Studio Code, and there will be maybe other tooling targeting ARM. As a structure, we have several main blocks. First of all, we have the parameters, and then these parameters may be used within the definition to flexibilize the deployment. Then we have variables, which can let us compose different expressions if you want, and also let us have more flexibility for the ARM definition. And then we have a collection of resources we define. And this is the main section of the ARM template structure. And at the end, we can have outputs. We can push to the output results of the execution. At the right side, you can see this actual format of the template structure. And you can see that we have this JSON structure. And at the top of the definition, we have schema reference. How we will apply ARM model for MVC Music Store. First of all, we have defined it during our series, the deployment within two resource groups. The reason was that for Linux app service deployments, we need to have separate resource group than the Windows one. And by this, we will also have two ARM templates, because one ARM template at the resource group level. These templates will include the resources, but not the code packages, the deployments of the applications. They are not supposed to be included in the provisioning definition. It's a code and it will be deployed as a code package. On the container side, we will eventually be able to reference some container images, but in the same way, we will not specify the container images and the repositories used in Azure Container Registry, for example, within the ARM template. For deploying MVC Music Store, we have used systematically the Azure portal. We will, in the real life, use more systematically deployment models like ARM, because we need to automate these deployments as much as possible. So we will either try to define from the beginning the ARM template from the creation standpoint, or we can also reverse engineer the existing deployments and get the ARM template from that and automate with it the deployment chain. Let's see that in the demo. Let's take as example the resource group containing the Linux related resources. So in this resource group, we have our resources listed, and we have this automation script tab. If we select this tab, we'll see that there's a template generated. As you may see, there are warnings here. Unfortunately, not all the generations are completely successful. The good news in this case is that this resource details can be ignored, because actually we don't have, for example, in this case, we don't have extensions to our web app. So in our case, the template is correctly generated, we could say. In other cases, you may need to adjust the template manually and correct it if necessary. So this is actually the template that corresponds to our group of resources. You have, as you may recognize, the schema part, the parameters part, the variables. There are no variables generated. And then we have the collection of the resources. Okay, you have a JSON outline here, and you may select eventually these objects one by one and edit them. Also, we may have the parameters values separated in this JSON. You have here examples on how to deploy this ARM template with a CLI or with PowerShell. This is actually a generic script. This is the same script each time you generate the template. Only the template will change actually. You can also deploy the ARM template programmatically via .NET or Ruby or other languages. Now, once you have that, you may want to redeploy, for example, in another place with other names, this template. You can either deploy from this point by pressing this button. I may try to download this, and we'll have a zip file downloaded on our machine, and we can execute this in a command line. But you can also have an option of saving this template to a template library, which is already online. So I will save it. I'll give it a name and the description, for example, and I will save it. So once it's saved, we can see it in the templates list. We have it here, and we can deploy it from here. This is a custom deployment, it's called, and we'll create a new resource group. Okay, and let's give other names for our resources, for example, because we need to have unique names, of course. You may eventually need to extract other parameters if not all the parameters are generated or the template is not customized as you may wish. So we have that, and we need to agree these conditions, and we'll purchase. And the deployment is in progress, as you may deploy via portal or other ways. Let's follow up the deployment itself. And the deployment is complete. And we have here the new resources deployed in a new resource group.